Soundboard.
Whole sports all plays. Yeah. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Whole sports all plays.
Welcome into another episode of the Blown Coverage Podcast, where I'm your host, Porter Hayes, alongside my right-hand man, Chris Osborne, and we're just a few short days away from the college football playoffs. You got Alabama, Cincinnati kicking off first, and then Michigan and Georgia. Chris, I mean, we've been waiting a month, and it's almost here, and you know, with some of these bowl cancellations, and it's almost like we're back to last year again. It kind of gets you a little nervous. So, man, but first off, man, did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah, it was good, man. It was quiet. Family was happy. That's about all you can ask for. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good Christmas. Family had a great Christmas and went to the in-laws and picked up some few things for the office. And so, but yeah, a few days away, man. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to that Michigan-Georgia matchup. I know they're really trying to hype up that Alabama-Cincinnati game. Man, I just don't see it. Here's the deal. You know, Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach of all time, and I don't think anybody's ever going to catch him. I don't think anybody's going to catch what he's done. I don't think anybody's going to have the dominance that he did, and losing all the coordinators he has and the staffs and the rollover with, you know, people losing, 10 guys to the NFL every year. They still produce, and what some called a down year this year, and to lose to an unranked Texas A&M team and to come in and just blow out Georgia and to make it in the playoffs. But we've kind of got some thoughts that we kind of talked about the last time. But, man, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's put up or shut up time, like you said. I don't quite understand the hype. Honestly, it's Bama versus Cincinnati. If you put this as a regular season game, you're still going to get 40 to maybe 6.
Yeah.
So, and now it's in a pressure-packed situation where Saban shows every year why he's the best coach of all time. It's not going to be any different here.
And I can't remember what year it was, but there's only – correct me if I'm wrong – there was only 1 year where they've lost in the semifinals. And was that – I mean, other than that, nobody's beaten Saban in the semifinals. If they either haven't made it or they've only lost one time in the semifinals. And I want to say it was either to Florida State or Oregon or something like that. One of those years that
I think it was Ohio State that they lost to.
Ohio State. That's right. That's right. But so you're giving Nick Saban, the greatest of all time, 30 days to prepare for your team. And we've already seen – I don't know if you've seen it, but there was some kind of chatter on social media about how they want Bama and how you're not ready for Bama. Because you look what they've done to teams like Notre Dame when they played them in the semifinals, Michigan State in the semifinals. When Alabama and Clemson played in the semifinals, it was 24-6. I mean, just completely shut the team down. And when you give him that much time to prepare for your team, no matter what the coordinators is, it's going to – I mean, Cincinnati's going to have to come out and play like they did against Notre Dame and times 10. I mean, to have a chance to keep this within 21 points. I mean, no disrespect to Cincinnati. So when I say my prediction or I say it's not going to be close, I'm not disrespecting Cincinnati in any way. Until Saban proves me wrong, you have to go that route and say that they're just going to go in there and take care of business and look forward to the matchup between Michigan and Georgia.
Yeah, and like I said, I get the hype. They want to sell commercials. They want to do what they can for the game, but you know, it's a smokescreen. I wanted Cincinnati to earn it. They're undefeated and they're a conference champ. In my eyes, they earned it. It doesn't mean that they're going to beat Bama.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
So the expectations need to be they're going to come into this game. And I think a lot of this is a buildup from last year because they were so close to beating Georgia, but they weren't beating Georgia. They were beating a team that did not want to play that game. And that's the biggest difference is we had a lot of guys last year for that game that didn't play, declared because they weren't in the semifinal. This is different. This is a full-fledged Alabama team coming off the biggest win of their season.
Yeah.
They're going to be hyped. They're going to be ready to kill it.
And it's been proven this year. If it's not a college football playoff game, you're going to have the opt-outs. I mean, there's so many teams that have opted out and not played. Kids are wanting to go prepare for the draft, and it's just in that. I don't know if we mentioned this the last time I was on. We're on, but that's the reason why I want an expansion, is because it's going to get more of these teams to come in and it be meaningful. It be where less players opt out. And I am not saying that they don't have the right. They have the right to do whatever they want. If they choose to opt out, I have no hate on it. I don't disrespect any of the players choosing to do what they wish to do. And it's just, I think if you have more games like that, you expand the playoffs, you're going to get less teams that are wanting to have the opt-outs, because they're going to have something to play for other than a goodie bag and a free trip to Florida, or, but really, are you really getting hyped up to go play in the Potato Bowl or the Birmingham Bowl or Liberty Bowl? And it used to be a big deal, but it's one of those lower tier bowls. But another thing that we're dealing with, like I said, is with the COVID stuff again. It's starting to creep back up, and we've seen some cancellations and stuff. And the one that really got me was the UCLA one. I mean, 5 hours before kickoff,
yeah,
they canceled the game. And like I said, you're treading on thin ice when you, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not even close to being a doctor, but it's just when you're treading on thin ice when you state like your opinion, because when it comes to the player's health, so you really can't call foul. And the only time you can when it comes to the player's health is what Ole Miss did this season with their fake injuries. I mean, when you're looking at the sideline and then you're falling down, I can see that. But when it comes to the COVID stuff, it's just not like, if you're lying about it, that's on you guys. That's on you and your team, and you're going to have to deal with that. But it's not me to sit there and say, well, you're opting out because you had 4 guys on your defense opt out, and now a few people on the defensive side got sick. So therefore, hey, it is going to be what it is on that.
I would just say to that the media fueled COVID situation, it is a real thing, but there are times when the media sells it to be much worse. And when you have fear, not for yourself, but for everyone else as well, I think you do things maybe to save face, I will say. And I think the UCLA situation with Chip Kelly pulling out, there may have been people in his ear saying, y'all can't play this game. And it may have been days coming, and he just waited as long as he could. And finally somebody said, you're making the wrong decision to play. And he, then he pulled the trigger. Much too late. Like you said, 5 hours. That's not enough time to tell a team, hey, you're not playing tonight, go home. They should have been on a plane home days ago.
Yeah, because, I mean, you got to look at the fan aspect of it, and not just, hey, I want to see the best guy play. You got fans investing a lot of money and vacation and time to go down there and see these games, and you've bought your tickets that I think is non-refundable. I don't know if they're giving their money back on these cancellations. I don't know that. I haven't seen any publications, so I can't really speak on it. But still, if that's the case, it's hard that – and that's another thing with the opt-outs. These people are going and spending money to go see their favorite team play and their favorite player play, and they're not able to do that. But we see that in the pros, in load management, and people, sitting at like, in the NFL, the week 15, week 16, if you've locked up a playoff spot, they're going to sit their guys, because when it comes down to it, again, correlate that to the college. If you're making the playoffs, you're playing for something. If you're not, you're working on next year. So it goes hand in hand. The more we're getting under this with the NIL, the opt-outs, this free agency, this diva dash, college football is becoming more and more like the NFL. Now, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's not for me to judge, but it's what it's turning into. And I like the transfer portal because it's bringing more people that go out, and teams like in Arkansas that have been in the cellar of the SEC for 3-4 years. Now they go get a couple of transfers, and now they're winning 8 games. And there's so many teams that have, look at LSU and Joe Burrow, and Justin Fields going from Georgia to Ohio State, Kyler Murray, on and on. We can say how many people went at quarterbacks and went to other teams and had success. But, we'll get into our topics. Chris, you got a couple of topics, we're going to cover, kind of give us a rundown, give our fans a rundown. Also, fans, if you're listening, drop some comments in the comment section. And I can't see the comments, but Chris, you can. So just if we get some comments, we'll talk about them and answer the questions the best we can.
Yeah, so if you guys comment, we'll just bring it up here. Drop a question. We'll say, okay, well, what do you feel about this? So one topic that I did want to cover, with all the recent COVID stuff, obviously, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. We get variant after variant. It's just going to stay the same. But the way it shapes sports is something to talk about, because you look at last year's lockdown. If you saw an NBA game, for a while, everything was virtual. There were no fans at the games. Everything was computerized. It was all through Facebook, whatever. There's a chance, if COVID keeps going, we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. And I feel I don't have any inside info. I'm not saying this is, but I feel like you're going to start seeing packages that the games can be sold for, where you get a courtside seat or something to a Knicks game, but you're not there because they allow no fans. So I see, virtual reality being a big part of sports coming up. And one thing I think, like I said in our chat, NASCAR, they use drones now for all these different angles. That might be a thing that all sports starts to use a lot more of, and they might have a package you can buy and control one of the drones, or see that exclusive view. A lot of things can change because we're in uncharted territory. We've never had a situation where there's an illness going around that has killed millions of people the way it has, and sports is always going to make their money. That is one thing that's always going to be true about sports. If the money's there, they will find a means to make it happen. And this is going to be no different. So I wanted to know what you thought, where you think that comes into play, and how much of a likelihood it is within the next 5 years.
I don't think in the next 5 years. I'm looking at this year, and maybe, once they get to where, we look at the viruses that's come and gone over the years. And I know this is not like any other virus, because in our lifetime, we've never seen shutdowns like this. But I think once they get it under control, the vaccines and whatnot under control, where it's passed along kind of like the flu. If you get it, you stay home, but it's not like the biggest deal where it starts shutting down things. And I cover the Arkansas Razorbacks women's sports, and I was on a press conference with the women's basketball coach today, and there's SEC games getting postponed left and right. They're scrambling to, we've got a game, but we might have to find somebody to play in between games if you can't find a game within 10 days out. So we're starting to see it in basketball. You're seeing it more in the NFL, but to your point of what you said about where do I see things going when it comes to the facts of the money, you're already seeing the NFL drop down their 10 days to 5 days, so they're doing things to make it to where if you do test positive, they're going to make it to where if you're clear, you don't have to sit out that 10 days. It's only 5 days. But it's not saying if you still test positive, you've set out your 5 days and you can't come back. But, last year it was 10 days if you're unvaccinated, and that cost you, if you played a Sunday and a Thursday game, that cost you 2 weeks of your season. So when it comes to that money aspect, they're trying to do what they can to, and if a guy's clear, and if he doesn't have symptoms and he's tested negative, hey, put him back on the field. He's okay. I just think last year, you're dealing with something that you've never dealt with before, and you didn't know how to handle it. Now they kind of got a little bit playbook to where they can do, and they can see, if a guy tests positive, if it's a mild case or there's asymptomatic, and they're 5-6 days on average, they're able to come back and play. So I think that's part of it, but a lot of it, I think too, is, they're looking at the money that could be lost, and a teams, when you're running billion-dollar organizations, it's hard when you're starting quarterback comes out and he tests positive, well, you're out to 10 games. And you look at where we're at in the NFL season. If you're right there on the bubble of a wild card spot, or you get a lot for a divisional, divisional spot in the playoffs, if your quarterback's out 2 weeks, or your running back's out 2 weeks, or wide receivers out, there you could go from making the playoffs to you're out. So it's both ways. But then again, like I said, the last subject, I mean, we're not doctors, and I'm not going to sit here and say they're faking it or it's all about the money, because in the end, you're dealing with people's safety, and it's nothing to be played with. And if this is just a money grab and that's all they're figuring out, again, like I said, with the college side of it, it's on them.
I think that's the better safe than sorry conversation.
Yeah.
And all sports, all played. Montreal Canadiens of the NHL is not going to have fans at home games till the new year. They actually could get extended. And some teams, Canada's got their own set of rules. The Maple Leafs, I think, are another team that might do the same thing. But that's something that could, trickle down to, different sports, different, assets. But, like I said earlier, COVID is real. I'm not saying it's not. I do see where the media sometimes spins it a certain way to make it more, I will say, important than maybe it should be. I mean, if something like this is causing you to not leave your home when you need to, I think that's a bit much. If you need to be somewhere, if you need to carry on with your life, you should be able to do that. And there have been times I've seen the media just kind of spin things. So I just want to be clear about that. I'm not downplaying COVID. I mean, I had it last year. I think you said you've had it. It's real and people have died, but how it affects sports going forward can be tricky. We could absolutely run into a situation where, if it gets bad again, sports could go away again altogether. And, I feel like this time around, they'd be better prepared. Individual sports would say, okay, well, we'll play games, no fans, one location, like the NBA did. Everybody was in Orlando.
The bubble, yeah. They're in the bubble.
And, I mean, that's a possibility for different teams, but it's a topic that will keep coming up because we're not out of the woods. And Omicron seems to be lesser of an issue, but we're also coming back in the spring where COVID really took off.
And you're also, here in Arkansas where I live, we're actually starting to see a lot of flu cases. People are actually getting the flu, and it's like, it stinks because is it the flu? Is it COVID? Is it all this other stuff going on? You don't know, how to really rectify, is that person just has the flu? He's okay here in 3 days. Or again, they might have COVID, but they're testing for the flu. So they're like, well, he's got the flu. We're just going to sit him out a couple of days till he gets feeling better and then come back. And it's a tough situation because we're in sports. We do sports. We're in media, and we want to see sports. Fans, they pay money for the sports, and there's a lot of money tied into this. But when it all comes down to it, it is just sports. And if people, like when COVID came out last year and the year before, when people were dying and people were getting really, really sick. I mean, it's just a game. It's just sports. And we got to do we can't cram 70,000 people in a stadium if people are outbreaks, even if it is the flu. You don't want 70,000 people crammed in the stadium and they all catch the flu or get some other sickness. You don't want that. And I think that's where we kind of sometimes take a step back and realize, all right, this thing's starting to have a big outbreak. People are starting to get affected, and we need to realize it's just sports. Get this thing under control again. We got in the mindset where we were safe. We played almost a whole college football season without any cancellations, any thought of it, really. We thought it was gone. And then all of a sudden this variant comes out and you're like, okay, it's just another variant. It's okay. And then it started creeping back up. And here in Arkansas, I think we went over 3,700 cases in one day. So, I mean, it's starting to really get to where, are we going back to the Zoom press conference? Or are we going to go back to the way it was last year? And as of right now, it's not. They haven't made any decisions right now, but we all know, we've seen when the sports world got shut down in one day. We all know it can happen at a blink of an eye.
Right. And, back to college football for a little bit. When you get that soundboard working and you can take calls, I have a cousin that I talk to almost every other day about football. His fix for the bowl situation is complex, but I'll break it down. He basically wants a 12-team playoff. And his reasoning, you've got 6 New Year's games. Take those 6 games, and that's your 12. Then you go to your semifinals, then you go to your final. The bowl games that are big, like the Sugar Bowl, honestly, the SEC team that ends up with it isn't going to be in that format Ole Miss or a team that's in the top 10. When you put that many SEC teams in a top 12, you would end up with a team like, what would it be this year? It would be A&M. They would probably get the sugar, and they'd want to play in that game. So you take the bowl games that would normally get a high-profile team that didn't make it and give it to a team that would want to play it. And so you have less bowl games, for one. But this would be an incentive for teams like A&M, teams like Wisconsin, who are good teams, but we're not going to be playoff teams, a bigger bowl game. And then the guys that would want to play that game wouldn't declare, because that's the biggest problem is you end up with, 5-star talent that thinks they're going to be first-round picks, whether they are or not. They're going to skip and prepare for that day. And so teams, they get mauled. I mean, every year. You end up with a 90-person roster. You go to a bowl game, and you've got 70 or 75. So that kind of alleviates the issue there.
Yeah, and my opinion, I just think 12 is too far when you go to the expansion. Of course, if they do expand, I think they will go to a 12. I think that's what's been in the talks, but I just think you look at the 12th ranked team right now, you got Pittsburgh and then Utah. I mean, even if you gave Alabama, Michigan, or Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, Cincinnati the top 4 bye or top 2 bye, I mean, so you're going to have Georgia against Pittsburgh, or Cincinnati versus Pittsburgh, or Georgia, Utah, Georgia, Pittsburgh. It's going to be just like what we're talking about with the Alabama, Cincinnati, opposed to you look at this one: Alabama, Ole Miss, Michigan, Baylor, Georgia, Ohio State, and then a Cincinnati Notre Dame rematch. If you go to 8, there's always, that the 5, 6, the first 2 that are out. You got the first 4, then the 2 that's out. And then if you go to an 18 playoff, I think you're going to get more games. You're going to get more interest, and you're going to get some better games, because you look at, like I said, 1 through 8, Mississippi State or Ole Miss is not a slouch. They got blown out by Alabama, but even if I think Alabama and Ole Miss would be a really good game right now.
Yeah.
Granted, it might be another blowout, but still, yeah. But you look at the others. So outside Alabama, Ole Miss, Michigan, Baylor, Georgia, Ohio State, Cincinnati, Notre Dame. I mean,
those are good matchups.
Those are really good matchups. And you look at how they played out the top 4 this year. They didn't want an Alabama-Georgia rematch back-to-back. They was not going to do that. And, again, how I thought that just how Georgia played in that game and the defense looked so just not even interested in the game.
Yeah.
The defensive lineman, Davis, is that his last name?
Jordan Davis.
All-American, best defensive player, one of the best in the nation, if not the best. Acted like he didn't even want to be there. He played like 2 games, and then he was out of series. Now, granted, if he was dealing with some injuries, I don't know about that. I apologize for that. But, from what I was seeing, Georgia was playing like they didn't want to be there, or something was going on to make sure there's 2 SEC teams getting into this playoff. That's my opinion. You want to throw shade, throw hate, I understand. But I cover SEC sports. I've watched almost every SEC game. I've seen Georgia just dominate people on defense. And, yes, they finally played a team like Alabama that can score with them offensively, but just how they laid down and just mentally how they it's like, okay, we know we're the number one team. We lose, we're still going to get in. We know we're a lock for the college football playoffs. So did they rest and, hey, now let's go win this thing? Or was there a thing like, hey, we're going to make sure Alabama gets in? We want 2 SEC teams in, because what's a college football playoff without Alabama?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, the way Bryce Young and that offense looked, they looked like a top 4 team. So it's hard to say that in the end, Alabama didn't belong to be in, because they proved, I mean, they were just, I mean, lights out. They deserved it. But then again, you beat a team like Georgia, and then you have a team like Michigan sitting there, how they've been playing and how they played Ohio State. They made Alabama number 1 and Michigan number 2, because I think they wanted to give Alabama the 1 spot, and then again, if you have Georgia at 3, you're not going to put Alabama at 2, because there's that matchup. So I think that's the biggest complaint when it comes to the committee, is you want to get the best 4 teams in, and you're ranking them 1 through 4, who you think the best. You can't not sit there and then say, well, we're going to put Alabama number 1 because we don't want 2 and 3 to be Alabama, Georgia, and playing a rematch the very next game. So to me, I would have had Michigan at 1 because of their performance, what they did, and then had Bama at 2. But because of the rematch, I see why they did that. But then again, how they played so well in that SEC championship game, they deserve to be. They deserve the right to have that number 1 ranking.
Right, and I agree with that. I kind of right after the conference championships, I had Cincinnati at 3 and Georgia at 4. But I mean, I understand why they did the way they did. Like you said, they want the rematch, if there is one, to be in the national championship, not in the semifinal. And I'll just say, I find it hard to believe that an Alabama team that needed overtime more than 1 to beat Auburn can play as well as they did against Georgia. So I agree with you that something was up.
And it really wasn't. It wasn't just the Auburn game, though. I mean, Arkansas played them to 7 points. Look at the Florida game. I mean, they struggled to win in the swamp to a Florida team that, I mean, and I know you're giving your best shot to Alabama because it's Alabama and it's Florida. It was earlier in the season, but there was, I mean, the only game, and we talked about this last time, the Ole Miss game is the one where, okay, they showed their dominance. They took care of business when it was Ole Miss, but I think Saban and Kiffin, they got, Saban's got his number. He wanted to prove something, and then they go out and lose to Texas A&M, which was an unranked team at the time. I mean, it's hard to play, but that's another reason why I want the expansion. You're expecting these teams to be perfect. If you lose 1 game, they're already talking about how are you going to work your way back into the college football playoff. Yeah. It's not fair to, I mean, and I will say Alabama, it's not fair to teams like Alabama. You expect them to win every single game, and a bad year for Alabama is a 2-loss. A 10-2 season for Alabama is horrible in the eyes of the country and the fan base, and you look at a team like Arkansas, they go 8-4, and it's like you think they've won a national championship because they haven't seen an 8-4 record in a while. It's how the landscape of college sports is, and that's another reason. If you have 1 bad game, you still have a chance to get in the college football playoff, and even 2 losses. You can have some of these 2-loss teams now that, hey, man, we just didn't have our stuff together back in August. We lost 2 games, and we went on a 8-game winning streak, and then went to the conference championship game and blew out somebody who was ahead of us. Now they still have it in the conversation of, okay, they're the 8th ranked team in the nation. Let's make it an 8-team playoff. But I think that if you go to 12 and you expand to 12, it's not going to be any better than what we got now. But I think if you go to 8, you're going to get some really good matchups. You're going to get some of them teams that they faltered there at the end. I mean, you look at a Cincinnati. If they lose in that game, they make it all the way through, beat Notre Dame, and they lose to Houston, now they're automatically out. I mean, that's not really fair. I mean, I know you're not playing the strength of schedule, but you lose 1 game and now you're out.
Look at the team that placed them. It would have been Notre Dame who they beat.
Yeah. Exactly. And so that's where I think another reason is, and I'm not for these automatic qualifiers. I mean, a lot of people are saying you go to 8-12 and you have these automatic qualifiers. What if you have a freaking Utah team that goes in there 8-4 and win the Pac-12? You're going to give them an automatic spot in the college football playoff? I mean, so there's a lot of kinks to be worked out, but if they're going to expand, my personal opinion, I think it needs to go to 8 because you're going to have some really good matchups year after year. You're going to have, opposed to if you go to 12, it's going to be where you're going to see a lot of blowouts and teams are you're going to have the same people in, opposed to if you put up because what I'm getting at is if you put Alabama against the 12th ranked team in the nation, and there's cakewalk until the Final Four, opposed to you throw up Alabama against, you put them up against Baylor. Say Baylor's the 8th ranked team. That would be a good matchup, and because Baylor actually, I said it when they played the Oklahoma State. That was one of the best defensive stands I've ever seen. And to say that against a Big 12 team, 7 straight times on the 1 yard line and you hold them. That's big for the Big 12.
Yeah. Well, defense is not something we ever talk about.
Exactly.
I really thought Texas would have a better defense this year. You look at their recruiting rankings, and they've hauled in a lot of 5-star players on that defense, and they have not shown up. And so I think just the Big 12, the Pac-12, the same thing. Defense, if y'all want to be taken seriously, you got to get a defense. And that's why I admired Oklahoma State. I watched a few games this year. Their D-line, they're unblockable. Baylor, too. Their front 7 at Baylor, they're going to have some NFL guys coming out of there. And that's not really heard of. You've seen a few Oklahoma guys make it, but it's not this huge line of great defensive ends from Oklahoma. We don't say that. So
that's why I'm kind of excited to see what OU does with Venables, because he's a defensive guy. So maybe, yes, it's going to be short-lived, and they're going to be into the Big 12 till 2025, and then they're going to the SEC. So, but it's going to be exciting to see when he's already going to be prepping to recruit his team for coming to the SEC. So it ain't going to be next year, but you're going to start seeing the transition on how OU plays, going into the SEC. And that's going to be interesting to see. Having OU and Texas, alongside LSU, Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. It's got Florida, Georgia. That's going to be a stacked conference.
Yeah, that's going to be a ride.
But we're looking forward to it. Hey, we're going to do another show next week. We're going to be recapping the 2 games, coming up and seeing what we can predict for the championship game on January 10th. And I know, Chris, you're looking forward to the Bulldogs being in it, and it's going to be a pretty big matchup. So if there's nothing else you got, Chris, we'll wrap it up. And once again, this has been the Blown Coverage. And don't forget, we are ASAP, powered by Sports and Culture Media, and we'll be back next week.
Appreciate it, man. Y'all have a good one.
Yes, sir.
Whole sports all plays. Yeah. Whole sports all plays. Whole sports all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. Whole sports all plays.